All right, well, we'll get started. This is the Juju Charms next step.
Oh.
See you later, Soren. We did this last cycle to kind of do a status check of where we're at with Charms versus where we are with, what our coverage is like of core OpenStack projects with the Juju Charms we have to deploy in. The last cycle we used these Charms quite heavily in our CI lab, so that's been my use of them. I'm not sure if anyone outside of our team is actually using them yet for much. But the idea is that they'll be used to deploy the stuff on hardware for production use. So if anyone is using these and they have problems with them, file bugs against the Charms or ping us on IRC. I think I'm the only person who's really committed any code to this stuff, so I'm happy to look over any patches you send. But the current Charms we have is listed up there. Nova Cloud Controller, which contains the API server and the scheduler, as well as the object store. Nova Compute, which can support non-multi-host networking setups, flat DHCP, but by and large I've been using it in the multi-host mode, so that Charm deploys Nova Compute as well as Nova Network to set up flat DHCP management of the network. Glance we have, that's both the registry and the API server, and Swift Proxy and Swift Storage. I developed at the beginning of last cycle to kind of proof of concept this whole thing. Those need to be reworked, and that was a work item we had last cycle that I didn't really get to until the beginning of last week. Part of that was because I was waiting on new Juju features. So that's on the list below that we'll need to carry over this cycle. Keystone, Nova Volume, and Horizon were both work items from last cycle that I implemented this past cycle, kind of alongside Keystone and Horizon going into the main Ubuntu archive. And those are both functioning. We had to kind of rewrite the Keystone Charm with the rewrite of Keystone itself. So that was kind of a pain. But those are what we have, and those are what we're using in our CI lab to deploy OpenStack and test it. As well, I use them personally to deploy on EC2 when I need to hack on OpenStack to kind of bootstrap a dev environment instead of using DevStack in a single node setup. On deck for this cycle, as far as I know, the only things we really need to worry about as services that need to be charmed is Quantum and Cinder. Is that right?
Yeah.
There's nothing new coming down the pipeline in terms of core OpenStack? Is there any incubated projects that are of note? No? Okay, so we'll need to come up with a quantum charm for both.
You might want to add charms for stuff that is not OpenStack core, but it's driven by Canonical.
Right.
Awesome stuff.
Right, yeah, I was going to mention that as something that could be deployed alongside Nova API if we wanted to. Disable EC2 support for whatever reason, but yeah, you're right. There were a number of nice to haves that we came up with last cycle, at the last session, at the last UDS, which were mostly feature requests on the current Charms that we have. I personally didn't have any cycles to get to those work items, so they're on there as postponed from last cycle. If anyone wants to pick those up, you're more than welcome to. Is anyone actually using this stuff yet?
I am.
Okay, Davey, anyone else? Just to get an idea of how...
I know people use it, they read it at the very least so that they can understand a little bit better about OpenStack.
Okay, because the reason I ask is this last cycle, we've been running QA against upstream chunk and using these Charms to deploy them. So when something changes upstream in terms of configuration or deployment, those need to be reflected in the Charms, and I kind of use the trunk of Charm against trunk of OpenStack at all times and update it very liberally. So I don't know if I should be more concerned with breaking people's setups if there are people using those Charms. So speak up now, otherwise I'm going to keep doing that, I think. Yeah, so there's these postponed items. I don't really know if those will carry over as work items this cycle. Davey, maybe you can weigh in there. Aside from the Swift rewrites, so there are some features that landed in Juju very late this cycle that deal with being able to address relations to other services. So can you explain it? Not subordinates, being able to execute charm hooks relations outside of your context. If someone from Juju wants to explain that better than me.
Yeah, I think we need to. It's relatively complicated. It just allows for a degree of orchestration amongst relations that otherwise you've been using some sort of watches and sleeps, something along those lines, right, in order to really see what's going on before adding a new relation.
Yeah, so the issue mainly came from Keystone, or actually it could be applied to the other ones. Anything that needs to talk to a database, but Keystone specifically, because when you relate a service like Nova or Glance to the Keystone service, it needs to generate credentials for that service in its database, service credentials and endpoints and locations for those API endpoints. That gets stored in its database. If you later add a relation to a new database, a new backend store, that data needs to get into this new database somehow, otherwise Keystone is completely empty. So what I need to do or someone else is adjust the Keystone charms and any other charms that we have that can make use of this feature, so that if we do introduce a new backend data store, be it MySQL or Postgres, something other than the local SQLite database, it triggers the events on the other relations to replay the information that it needs to put back into the database, if that makes sense. So anyway, that's something I'll be doing.
Dad, a question.
The capability is simply described as you can call you can execute relation hooks for other relations outside of
it.
But yeah, all the postponements, that's really adding polish, right? I mean, you know, we've got a good infrastructure so far, but all the ones which were postponed, it's all the extra polish that I think we probably do need for this release.
Well, yeah, there are feature requests onto the charms themselves, and one thing that I kind of did when coming up with these work items last cycle is coming up with this long list of things that aren't necessarily tied to the release that can be added to the charms at any point. So I had all these pending work items that never actually came through. I'd like to this time just keep it limited to the scope of what we're adding to OpenStack core in this next release, and making sure we have at least coverage of those in the same way we did for Horizon and Keystone this past cycle. And then anything on top of that are nice to haves as far as I'm concerned. If we wanted to get crazy, we can try to cover every possible configuration of OpenStack under the sun, but we'll probably, I don't know, not sleep for the next 6 months.
So speaking of that, every possible combination of OpenStack under the sun, what about doing host aggregates to do a heterogeneous setup, so that we've got ARM running under one host aggregate and x86 running under another host aggregate?
Yeah.
Where would you put that? In this session or outside of this session? We're going to have another session here in a few minutes.
Well, is it an ARM feature or is it a Nova feature post aggregates?
It's a Nova feature post aggregates.
So if I understand the feature correctly, I'm not sure that I do, and I'll have to look at it as it develops, but you deploy Nova Compute in different cells or groups of compute nodes.
It's separate than cells, turns out.
I don't know. You can explain it.
I wasn't in the session.
Okay.
So I know of it, but it's been one of the indications that you might be able to use host aggregates to do heterogeneous Nova computes. So we can table just that discussion since there's nobody else in here to address it.
Once it lands, why don't we have a request? And if it lands, then we don't have to worry about it.
I suspect it will require some charm work, though, to take advantage of.
Okay.
So how far are you from supporting all-in-one DevStack style installs?
So that's what I was hoping we'd talk about, is using Juju to drive a development environment for OpenStack. An all-in-one setup would require all of these charms being condensed into one giant charm that deploys all of this. And since there's no relation to any other service, and it's all self-contained in one, it just turns into a really long install script that looks something similar to DevStack as it is now.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not something you evolve to something better, because the drawback of DevStack, it's a dead end. You cannot evolve it into more an installation that would use more nodes.
So on that note, something that we all know, in fact Clint's just said, charm splice, which is basically concatenates them together, yeah? And by keeping them separated, that would still provide the flexibility for maintaining, but also I'm assuming that you could still add dependency on external services. So if you wanted to add extra compute nodes, for example.
So you would not be able to remove the one that is in the unified charm, but you
Well,
would be able to add more.
you generate, what I'm thinking with what Clint's been driving is basically you run a command which concatenates the charms all into one locally, deploys locally, everything in one, yeah? And then you can also add additional extra services using external providers, perhaps. I don't know how that would sit, because then that allows you to be able to have the flexibility to be able to expand and still use the logic and relations from Juju.
How far are we from supporting multiple services, multiple things deployed on the same
Co-location.
collocation?
I'm sorry, in terms of subordinates, or
Yes.
or the ability to go and have LXC containerized things.
No, subordinates.
It's not subordinates, it's different than that. You mean deploy Glance, Nova, and Horizon on the same node, but deploy Keystone on a separate node?
Yes. Yeah, that's not.
Not going either?
We're not. It's not something that is being currently planned.
And supporting LXC,
Other than this charm splicing technique that exists.
so that we would emulate multiple machines on the same machine, but deploy the different nodes in different Juju hosts, and that would be different LXC containers.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you just now.
But you could still use Juju to deploy multiple nodes into separate LXC containers on the same machine, right?
Yes.
That's already supported.
Yeah, that's our local.
And
Yes.
could you do a
So-
DevStack-like thing?
We gave this a shot earlier in maybe January or so, just taking what we have that we were deploying onto hardware or to EC2 and deploying it locally, all 8 charms or 8 services, however many it was, on a laptop with an LXC. And it's not as simple as just doing it. There was a lot of LXC-related problems we ran into with having that much going on. I don't know if Scott and I were looking, I don't know if Scott's here, but things like libvirt in a container with LVM, namespace issues, LXC related things that when I looked at it for the first time weren't working. I don't know if anyone.
Well, LXC has improved quite a bit this cycle, so we should definitely give it another revisit, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly try it. If anyone has a local LXC provider bootstrapped right now, we can just deploy it and see what happens. Or,
My gripe with the concatenation of all the Juju charms into a single thing is that it doesn't really provide a better introduction to Juju than running DevStack, because it's like a hack on top of Juju to install multiple things on the same machine. It's not like a good introduction to
You
using
want
Juju
containers,
to do the
yeah.
Juju style install that happened to be on the same machine, because for convenience we just want to run it that way as a replacement to DevStack. But then, you got exposed to Juju, it looks cool. I should probably try to use it to deploy 2, 3, 4 machines.
But I guess you also want to make sure they're not coupled to being on the same machine as well, which the containerization enforces.
I wanted to serve also as an introduction to Juju, so that people would naturally use Juju to do more with it, rather than be in the same kind of dead end as you end up with DevStack.
So yeah, apparently running apt-get and dpackage in 8 different containers at the same time hoses your system in terms of its I/O use. That was one of the things we saw. It fell over pretty quick after 2 or 3 running at the same time. But to the point of a dev environment, I think LXC is our best bet. Otherwise, we're doing it in EC2 with all of these services deployed across 8 or 10 nodes and ranking up an hourly bill of who knows how much. or whatever cloud provider is out there, right?
Either NXC or collocation of charms.
Right. It doesn't sound like that's happening soon, right? Service collocation.
Are you sure it's not clean?
And then in terms
Maybe
of
you can wait until to do the all-in-one stuff. Wait until those features are ready.
So the problem with the all-in-one and just splicing them, I'm assuming, Clint, that's something in Jujitsu or some other tool to actually do this automatically, is that the two charms are written in Python, two are in Shell, and they're kind of laid out strange with symlinks and libraries that they're loading. So I don't know if that's really an option either.
So how many, as we cannot have service collocation, how many, at the minimum, how many nodes bare metal do we need to make an OpenStack installation with Juju?
Do you want to include everything? You want Swift?
Swift, Keystone, the whole stuff.
Nova. Okay.
So a bare minimum to get instances spun up, or everything with volumes in the dashboard and
dashboard, Swift, Nova, Glance, Keystone.
So
it's full dev stack, yeah.
Currently 8, I think.
more than that. Nova Cloud Controller, Nova Compute, Glance, Keystone, Nova Volume, Horizon, the Bootstrap node for Juju, RabbitMQ, MySQL. And if you want to add Swift into that, you need Swift proxy and one other storage node after I do this rewrite of the charm, but as it is now, 2 other storage nodes. That's 12 or 13 nodes.
My point about waiting for the features to be ready is that you probably won't have two opportunities to switch developers from what they're used to, which is DevStack currently, to Juju as a tool for developers to bootstrap an OpenStack environment that also serves as an introduction to Juju. They will try it once, and if it doesn't meet their expectations, they will just use it. Next time they will try Puppet or something else.
Right.
And so better be ready rather than use some kind of hack to make sure that everything works on the same machine. Be ready for it to be the introduction to Juju for OpenStack developers rather than.
So if that's something we really want to focus on this cycle, we should look at LXC close and try to solve whatever problems are there, not just for this use case, but it sounds like that's something people are very interested in. So I don't know if there was a session on LXC improvements or anything like that. This UDS, is there?
There was one earlier, supposedly.
There's one Friday, I think.
Okay. Well, I don't think Scott's here, but he was looking at that closely and trying to do exactly that, and he called it JStack and deploy everything local and have it containerized.
Yeah.
And
Do we try it before you talk about it too much? Because, like I said, it's one chance, one opportunity to
right. I mean, and you're right.
to do things with the right way of packaging rather than hackish shell scripts.
That's a good idea, Clint. Yeah. Yeah, so you should probably check in the search as well.
So I can't think of much else other than continue on with the CI we're doing tied to the trunk charm development for Quantum, Cinder, and the charms we already have. So making sure that Nova's config changes, we change our charm, just keep it in line with what's going on upstream to make sure that at any day you can use the charm to deploy trunk OpenStack on Folsom OpenStack on Quantal, and hopefully precise as well.
Have you looked at Quantum yet? Whether, or are we going to go specifically to the base switch or the Linux bridge?
I haven't. We're going to talk about that, the OpenStack next steps, I think.
Okay.
But whatever we decide, we're going to need a charm to do the quantum service as it is, and we'll have that. Anyone else have anything they want to address?
I mean, we spoke in the previous session about HA for the charms as well.
I mean, some people seem to think that's an easy thing to do with Juju, is setting up a pacemaker DRBD cluster in charms. I don't believe that it is, and I would love to see someone prove me wrong.
Well, what did you think about the approach of having a subordinate charm which set up a replicated file space?
Replicated to where? Its own service unit?
Yeah.
Why?
No. So, for example, in the lowest case, if we used NFS, for example, yeah, so you deployed an NFS server, and then NFS client is a subordinate charm, and then add a relation between them, you would then have shared storage, right?
Right.
As a simplest example.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm just saying.
Right, so and there's an NFS NFS
Yeah.
server charm out there to do what? Shared file system for Nova's instances and Glance's
I don't
images?
know. I mean, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is doable as a relation on each of the charms to put whatever persistent storage they need to be shared between them somewhere. It would just require the work of adding the interface and the hooks to do that.
So we should we should certainly put a focus on HA as well, I think, really, because that's what really polishes this stuff.
Okay, and Clint, do you want the DRBD work item?
I think he just said yes.
Yeah, 4 lines ago.
Yes, it does. I mean, it's configurable, but the network between the nodes needs to exist.
Soren, you got anything? You've always got something.
I'm saving it. I'm kidding. No, I don't.
Really?
Yeah.
The most opinionated person in the room hasn't got anything.
Well, this is your stuff. I mean, I have my own stuff.
Is the
I don't care about this. These are just the better seats.
Okay.
So did you answer the CI Lab question when I wasn't looking at?
Sorry.
Clint keep asking, are the CI Lab charms? He's asked twice.
The branch locations for the CI Lab charms, we have stacked branches that are stacked on the current development release of, or development version of the charm, where we apply certain patches to it that tailor it to our needs in our CI lab. So it does things like install from a local repository that only exists in our lab, sets up some user permissions on files in the file system that really shouldn't happen anywhere else. So those are located in our charm branches for that project. I don't think they're really relevant to the rest of the world, so I haven't made any attempt at pushing those changes into the main charm branches. So to answer your question, no, those are our own charm branches we maintain separately. But I do merge the features that need to go into the main charm branch into that branch on a weekly basis, or whenever I make a change that is triggered by some change upstream. So be it Nova Keystone authentication changes last cycle, there was lots of stuff going on, and all of the charms for that. And whenever I applied those first to our CI branches, they got synced back up to the main charm branches. So I would say the trunk branches and LP charms is the ones to watch.
Adam, what do you think about non-KVM based computes as other options?
I mean, non-libvirt or non-KVM? Because we have
non-KVM.
It's an option in the Nova
It
compute
is.
charm to specify the vert flavor you want, and that translates to the Nova compute hypervisor package that it installs.
yeah,
So
I didn't
it's
know
separate
that.
in the package version, or the packages are separate for hypervisors. So we just installed.
And do you do a reboot for the Zen one?
I've not used it. I don't know that those packages install something usable or not. Do that? the Nova Compute Zen package? Does that actually work in?
I haven't used it.
Okay. What I was saying, Clint, is that the goodness you want in the main charm branches go into the main charm branches in most cases before they make it to our CI stuff. So I actually merge the main charm branches into our branches after I commit there first. Well, you'll have to give me a lesson on the subordinates because I'm not sure how I would do that, but I'm willing to if it's important to you. James, did you have anything you'd like to add? I don't know.
Sorry, I came a bit late. We talked about different network topologies supporting the charms.
So right now it supports flat DHCP and flat manager and flat DHCP manager. One of the postponed work items was to support VLAN network manager. We never got that far, and I'm hoping that this next cycle with Quantum being something we're charming and testing, that the network-specific stuff will move into there.
Yeah.
At least that's my understanding of Quantum, is that
Yeah,
it's Nova Network.
And part of the reason they're doing it is because VLANs don't scale well enough anyway, so I don't know that you need to ever do the VLAN.
Do you either Terry or someone know, does Quantum basically replace Nova Network?
It will.
Yeah.
So
It's
flat
required.
DHCP,
It's
VLAN
required
manager
to
go
be
away?
parity.
So the reality Quantum does not replace in Folsom.
No.
It will be an alternative for
It-
Folsom.
it-
Right, I mean,
default.
It may even be default.
when you use it, then
It-
it replaces it.
If
it doesn't.
it provides
Yeah.
full parity,
Nova
it will-
Network,
We don't deprecate Nova Network code,
Yes,
but
it will be
should
deprecated
be
in G.
default. So it's like
So are we testing the required Nova network topologies? We got enough coverage there?
The one we test, and the only one we test, is the multi-host DHCP manager, which, as far as I can tell,
Fish HA.
is the suggested way of deploying Essex. I haven't really heard too many people using VLAN compared to the multi-host stuff we're using or testing. So
Okay, well, we can look to supplement that with Quantum stuff as and when we've got that.
Joshua, you guys are using DHCP flat? Yeah.
Nick, you have anything else?
yeah, I think we could start investigating using other backends for Nova volumes.
Solid fire type stuff?
Anyone particular in mind? Nick?
Maybe Seth? I don't make it a hard requirement for this release, but I think it should be,
So,
Nice.
for Cinder though, you mean?
yeah.
Yeah, so it would be good to have
We-
Seth.
we had that
Do we have?
for glance, not volume, but that was one of the things that we wanted to get to last cycle that we just didn't.
I would say this is less, in terms of priority, RBD backend is more important than Ceph replacement, than Swift. I mean, for me, Swift is great in OpenStack, the way it works. You can have a multi data center setup with Swift. Ceph will never be able to do that.
We have a whole session on South
Yeah.
OpenStack, so discuss it there.
Well, in terms of charms, I think if we were to prioritize charms, I would say Ceph as used as an RBD backend for Cinder is more important in terms of priority than Ceph as an S3.
And if you're interested in OpenStack, Ceph and RBD, there's a session tomorrow which Clint has perfectly pointed out. So,
And
that's yours.
Anything else?
that's kind of dependent on a Ceph charm that can deploy the RBD backend as we needed to consume it. I don't know what the status of the Ceph charm is, or
Come to the session tomorrow.
Right,
and you'll
right.
Find out.
Yes.
Okay, should we call it then?
Sure.